The Egyptian Religion. From The Dwellers on the Nile, The Life, History, Religion, and Literature of the Ancient Egyptians by E.A. Wallis Budge. The Egyptian word, which may be translated by God, is Netr or Utcher. In the plural, Netru or Netru. The meaning of the word is unknown. We have the neath, newt, kind of put into more broad context, right? A worker of power. The Egyptian Christians, or Copts, adopted this name for God in their translations of the scriptures, where it appears under the form of Naute, Nauti. In the books of moral precepts, the author is often prefixed to the Neter, the God, just as the Arabs always speak of Allah, i.e., Al-Ilah, the God. One sage wrote, "Seat thyself on the two arms of the God," words which at once call to mind the everlasting arms in Deuteronomy 33:27. Commit thyself for security to the hands of the God. It is he who bringeth a man into Gimentet, the other world, where he is safe in the hand of the God. Another sage wrote, "The things that God doeth cannot be known. Daily bread is according to the dispensation or planning of God. God loveth obedience. He hateth disobedience. A good son is indeed the gift of God." Another sage wrote, "Noisy, vain repetitions are an abomination. To the sanctuary of God. Pray thy prayer with a loving heart. Pray thy prayer with a loving heart in secret." Well, you can repeat things thousands of times a day and it not be vain repetitions. But, you don't make it merely a ritual, right? Even if it is an obliged ritual, you do more than just get through it. Pray thy prayer with a loving heart in secret. He will do for thee all that is necessary for thy daily deeds. He will hearken to thy supplications, receiving thine offerings. Now, there's a saying of Muhammad that brings up an interesting point, that there is the ritual prayer. But there is the ritual prayer with the ritual prayer that if you missed it, it's a tragedy like losing your family and all your possessions. Some think that God referred to in these passages was the local god, Ra, or Yemen Ra. But even if this be so, it does not do away with the fact that the writers of them conceived of the existence of an almighty being who possessed some of the attributes of the power of God. In the precepts with which King Khati wrote for his son in the 3rd millennium BCE, he says, "God hath hidden himself, knowing the dispositions. None can resist the Lord of the hand. The disposition of him that is right of heart is more acceptable than the ox of the evildoer. Work for God. He will work for thee in like manner. Regulate men and women, who are the flocks and herds of God. He made heaven and earth for their pleasures. He scattered the darkness on the waters. He made the breezes of life for their nostrils, for they are the images of him who came forth from his members." Images belonging to, a son belonging to, it's the same sort of language, but people thought, well, maybe this is what God looks like. Maybe this is, they don't quite understand how people spoke in those languages. He mounted up into the sky for their gratification. He hath made fruits and herbs, flocks and herds, fowl and fish, for their subsistence. He slew his enemies, he destroyed his own children, because they conspired against him and rebelled. He made the daylight to please them. He journeyeth in a boat, that he can look upon them, or can be seen by them. He lifteth up himself in a shrine besides them, while situating himself over a throne. Got very personified, but it's not meant to be. When they weep, he heareth. He gave them a governor who was a ruler before his birth, a captain to stiffen the back of the feeble man. He maketh for them magic. Haka-ow. Some people used to say haka, but so sort of like the astral soul, if we want to call it that, the working of it and manipulating it to be a weapon wherewith to destroy the power of untoward happenings and terrifying visions by night as well as by day. Well, over what, wholly other and terrifying may not be the best words to put them together, but and the illusion about conspiring against and rebels, goes back to that tradition that we shared, that that Ra's children, Iblis and his children, destroyed the men who came forth from his eye because they reviled him. Another legend says that Hathor, who was the eye of Ra, destroyed mankind. The mention above of the entity who mounts up in the sky and travels in a boat certainly points to Ra, or for whatever, the great sun entity, as the entity who supposedly created men and things, and who sailed across the sky daily in an indestructible boat. Now, it's clear from what we saw before, he's a demiurge who has either went too far with his claims or actually convinced himself that, I am the creator, like the guy who one of my interview subjects followed that said, I had a vision of myself in like a children's cutout book. These aren't his words. And I was in the middle of it, so I must have been the creator of this world, and the world must be some flat or concave thing, or... Yeah. But, though the Egyptians had made offerings to him in his temple, and hailed with joy the processions through the streets, during which his statue was carried by the priests, it's impossible to believe that they thought it was the jewel-studded gold figure which they saw, who had created the heavens and the earth and themselves. The sun was the dwelling of the entity in the sky, and his statue can only have been regarded as a temporary habitation for the occasions when he appeared on earth. Egyptian theologians in the earliest period asserted that Ra was the offspring of Tamu, who proceeded from the primeval waters, Nanu or Nu. Nupatu. Yeah. And that Nupatu was as the father of the entities, including Ra, and Tamu is made to say in the Book of the Dead, chapter 17, I was alone. I came into being from Nanu. So that would be Uwa Yaku Xprun Mandu. In the same chapter, the entities are said to be only the names of Tamu and Ra, and as Ra was only a name of Tamu, the Egyptians from this point of view had reason for saying that Ra, who appeared in the form of the sun, was the one and only God, and therefore for the creator of everything that exists. Now, if you have a numinous experience and you encounter a jinn, or even your own, if you encounter yourself as soul, but then there's a spirit that occupies the soul, really, right? So even this self is, but the true self is not what people would call the self. Oh, well, I am soul. Well, the soul again is operated, but that's something else. But imagine if you only knew of one being, no matter what the being was, light being, a fire being, whatever. You might think that it is the only God. The oldest company of 9 entities in Egypt was that presided over by Tamu. In addition to him, it consisted of 4 entities. Well, it consisted of 8 entities, male entities and female entities, 4 each, which indicates that jinn, if they're really entities. Nu and Nut, Hahu and Hahuit, Kaku and Kakuit, Gerh and Gerhit. The eat, just like in later languages, is an indicative of the female. The first pair were the male and female properties of water. The second pair represents its everlasting existence. The third pair, its darkness. And the fourth pair, the night which enveloped it. This was the teaching of the priesthood of Dahoti and Chemnu, Thoth and Hermopolis, and is probably older than the monastic civilization in Egypt. Entities of Dahoti's company, Asten Dahoti, the heads of frogs, and the demonesses, the heads of serpents, but the horrible and monstrous creatures that inhabited Apsu, the primeval waters of Babylonian mythology, are wanting. The Kulus what's the plural for Kulu? Under the Old Kingdom, the priest of Yindu, the On of the Bible, and the Heliopolis of the Greeks, who were the worshippers of the sun entity Ra, invented another company of 9 entities, and made their entity its president instead of Tamu. These entities, Pachur, are also written Natru, and consisted of Ra, Shu, Dafnut, Geb, Nut, Yasur, Yust, Set. I don't remember how to say Nephthus, and Yinpu or Her, for the 9 are company. You have 9 flags, either in a row with breaks divided into 3, or often contain more than 9 entities, and sometimes as many as 13 are mentioned. This was the great 9 entities of heaven. Natru Aat. But there was also a little 9, Natru Wrt, who were entities of earth. The pyramid text mentioned 39 entities. The third 9 were probably entities of the Duat, or other world. The last 5 entities and demonesses of the great 9, namely Yusur, Yust, Nephthys, Set, and Yinpu, were all the children of Nut, who is said to have brought all of them forth at a single birth. These entities married their sisters and begot sons before any of them were born. The magical and religious texts tell us much about these entities and their deeds. Well, certainly jinn, just like humans, have choice, so. The magical and religious texts tell us much about these entities and their deeds, but there is only one text that helps us to understand the views of the Egyptians about the creation of heaven and earth, and this, strangely enough, forms a part of a magical ritual which was performed in the temple of Yemen-Ra at Thebes. The object of the ritual was the destruction of Apep, Apophis, a terrible monster who lived in the nethermost parts of heaven and endeavored daily to prevent the rising of the sun entity Ra, and to stir up lightning, thunder, tempests, storms, hurricanes, and rain, and to obscure the light of the sun by filling the sky with clouds, mist, fog, and blackness. He was symbolized in the ceremonies that were performed in the temple by a waxen crocodile, on which the name of Apep was cut. This was wrapped up and placed inside a papyrus case, on which the name of the monster was written in green ink, and then burnt in a fire of casau herbs. Why he shows the characters for some words and not others. Whilst it was burning, the priest stabbed it with a knife and spat upon it, and pouring filthy water on it, and stamped upon it with his left foot. This ceremony was repeated several times during the day and night, and various chapters of the book of overthrowing Apep were recited at the same time, and exposing not only good herbs, but your own left foot or the shoe that you're in to filthy water gives Apep power. But they believe otherwise. See my, you may want to see my, the new alternative left snake video to, give an alternative to the alternative to the left and the regular left, as, the Egyptian model of what Apep can represent. The text that describes the Egyptian cosmology is called the Book of Knowing How Ra Came into Being, and how to overthrow Apep. The story of the creation is put into the mouth of Nebuchadnezzar, the entity who is considered to be the Lord to the utmost limit, the uttermost limit of the universe. And before we get to what he says, the creation, Nanu, the entity of the primal waters, lifting up the Atet boat of the sun into the heavens. The solar disk is being raised up in the sky by the beetle entity Kthra on one side of Yust on the other. Nephthys. The entities in the boat are Geb, A, a name of Thoth, maybe Hek, Hu, and Sa. Beyond is the Duat, or kingdom of Yistir, which is circular in form and is surrounded by his body. So, that's upside down, so let's look at those characters in that order, and the other characters in the other order. And Nephthys, where's Nephthys? Oh, we don't have good characters for that. Bach, Yah. So Bach is, yeah. Not Bach. Pob. Not Geb. Pob. Why did they say Geb? Persu. I am. Nu. Sinu Nurture Pun Fuya but I don't see Est, and I don't see, Isis and Osiris. I don't see them. Okay. He says that there was no heaven on earth, no heaven, no earth, no serpents, no reptiles. All these I produced out of the inert, watery mass of Nanu. There was no place for me to stand upon. I uttered a spell over my heart or mind, in which I laid the foundations with strict exactitude of everything that I made. I was alone, for I had not then fashioned Shu and Tefnut, and there was no other being to work with me. I laid the foundations in my own heart of all the multitudes of things that came into being, and of all the things that were produced by them, and of everything to which they gave birth. I had union with my own shadow, something with the T at the end, yet, oh, Cobbet, and I begot myself an offspring. The entity Shu, the atmosphere and light and heat, and the entity Tefnut and humidity and moisture. From being one entity, I became three entities. Uwa, Ya, and you see the three marks. I lifted up, three lines. I lifted up Shu and Tefnut out of the Nanu in which they existed, and my eye, the sun, followed after them. Then I joined my members together, and I wept over them, and a man came into being from the tears that fell from my eye upon my members. My eye was wroth with me when it came and found that I had made another in its place, and I requited it with the gift of the spell which I had made, and I brought it forward to the place that it hath in my face, and since that time it hath ruled the whole earth, and the power which I bestowed upon it falleth on vegetation and on the things that creep upon the earth. Shu and Tefnut brought forth Geb and Nut, and Geb and Nut brought forth Yasir. Her Chenti an Ma'at, the blind Horus, are the night sky without a moon. Set, Yest, and Nephthys. In another version of this narrative, the entity Thbreh says, my name is you, Sears, are, Osiris. Well, certainly there's meaning behind Osiris that kind of does connect you to God, but see, when they're worshiping one entity or another, they have to work in and make it sound like it's the god or the top god. But think of what some of these things could mean or represent other than literally being this, and what metaphysical and physical truths they could be connecting to. The account of the creation, summarized above, is found in a papyrus in the British Museum, number 10,188, 10,188, which was written towards the close of the 4th century BCE, but the ideas and beliefs described in it are as old as dynastic civilization. The creation of Shu and Tefnut by Temu or Khbre from his own body is mentioned in the pyramid text of the 6th dynasty, and the fact that the oldest trinity known consists of two entities, of two demons and one demoness, is noteworthy. Two males and one female. The statement that the forms of every created object were depicted in the mind of the greater before they existed is especially interesting, for they reproduced in the writings for it is reproduced in the writings of several of the early fathers of the Christian Church. On the matter of how the power of evil, which is symbolized by the crocodile Apep, came into being, the papyrus is silent. The Christian fathers identify him with Satan or the devil, and hold that he was the general of the hosts of heaven who rebelled against God, and who was hurled headlong to earth and was destroyed. Well, in the ancient Egyptian and otherwise, we see differences in their matter. Snakes and fire versus light beings, kind of beyond gender, but some people who can't read it can kind of see some things into it. But some things, just like in India, some of the entities are referred to in language that is not quite literally appropriate. The Egyptian texts show that Apep was never destroyed, and that the utmost that Ra could do to him was to paralyze him by a glance of his eye, and to drive his spear-like rays into his body and shrivel him up. But Apep recovered from these injuries, and though rendered impotent today, was able to threaten the power and existence of Ra on the morrow. And it's interesting that it tends to be 5 knives. So, creed, the contact prayer, charity, fasting, pilgrimage. It's the same model that keeps down. And one maintains one's submission by one's surrender unto the God. Keeps the evil at bay, repelling evil with good, that sort of principle, as I say, try to say every evening. One of the verses at least makes that point. On another subject, Neperture is silent. These the Dwat, or Dwatpur, or otherworld, or underworld, that is the abode of the departed spirits, that is for this region formed the kingdom of Yusur. A brief description of it will follow the account of this entity. Now, the personification and generification of Yusur, see, you can go beyond some of these names, and it removes some of the personifications and some of the stories attached to the personifications. And, wait, it's all talking about the same God, isn't it? Or sometimes it's just, okay, there's demons off to the side, but usurper entities, this is a key usurper entity myth. Ra, the sun entity, the midday sun, was undoubtedly the national entity of Lower Egypt during the Old and Middle Kingdoms, and its priesthood at Yenu Rasu, the southern Yenu, the Hermonthis of the Greeks, and Armant, or Erment of the Arabs. Well, there's no there's no there's not that E sound in Arabic, but they go E because you have the Yud and the Ya and the line underneath before it, but possess considerable power. But the greatest of all the entities of Upper Egypt was Osiris. At one time, the moon entity, the centers of whose cult were Abydos and Pa'asir, Busiris in the Delta, where Yemen was chosen to be the national entity of all Egypt. Ra was associated with him only for his name came second and followed that of Yemen, and Yemen meaning the hidden one. Again, the very personifications make the name kind of sound silly. Well, how is he hidden if we can understand his form? But from the first to last, neither companion nor counterpart was given to Yusur, who, even under the Old Kingdom, ousted Ra from his supreme position in the funerary text, which his priesthood had assigned to him as the great judge in heaven, the position of Yusur as the entity of the dead par excellence, and their judge was never usurped by any other god. Or they didn't record any other usurper myths. The Egyptians regarded Ra as the provider for their existence in this world, and Yasur as the cause and source of their lives in the next. And remember the connection to the dog star and being the provider, or the dog, and that sort of thing, and how Surah 53 in the Quran talks about, well, God is the provider of what you consider to be the provider. It was as the monuments show their duty to make offerings to the entities of their country and to honor the local entity. But the wise man, in accepting the gifts of Ra, lived his life in such a way as to secure the acquittal of his soul at the trial which it would be subjected to in the judgment hall of Yasur. In spite of their ancient and universal trust in demonology, the Egyptians from the earliest times believed that men would be rewarded or punished for the deeds done in the body, and that there would be a last judgment. The oldest description of this judgment is found in a papyrus at St. Petersburg, and in it King Khati, about 2800 BCE, says to his son, Yasur in the form of a mummy wearing the double crown and manat, the inkpot thing, and holding the emblems of rule, huk, and life, ankhs, seated on a chair of state, set upon a platform and having 9 steps. He, in the form of a mummy, is the support of the great scales. His company of 9 entities watch the working of the scales. We have the 9 gates of which our bodies are: eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, genitals, anus. Watch the working of the scales. The 2 dog-headed apes, baboons of the Hote, are taking away Set in the form of a black pig in a boat. Yinpu looks on. And from the Book of the Gates, we've gone into the gates in more detail in the Egyptian Heaven and Hell book. And this 2800 BCE text, let's start. Know thou that the Chaut, who judge wrongdoers, will show Chautu, probably, who judge wrongdoers, will show no pity on the day of judgment of wretched men. In their hour when they are performing their appointed duty, it is a terrible thing for the man who knows to be charged with it. Buoy not up thy heart with the idea that length of years will excuse thee. They look upon a whole lifetime as a single hour. They make their trial after a man's death. His actions are set near him as evidence. In the other world, existence is everlasting, and he who puts this out of mind is a fool.